Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 6, Pike's Peak. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news about the future Star Trek movies, the literature side of Star Trek, and a perfect cast announcement, and then discussing Lower Decks Season 1, Episode 8, Veritas.
And we've also got a great audience question to get to, as well as, of course, our main story, which is going to be an exploration of Pike and the peak he gets at his future. It's all coming up. Stay with us. Well, I should be sounding significantly better than I did last week. I'm actually not entirely sure what happened to make my mic sound awful, but people enjoyed the episode anyway, so that's cool. How are you, Tim?
That's always a good sign. I'm doing good, thanks.
Good. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, me too.
Your mic sounds good to me.
I'm glad to hear that now that we've started recording.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Hey, so we got some Star Trek news. Who goes first? We haven't even decided this.
Well, I mean, you've got the big stuff, and it's your show, so.
All right. Well, you don't want to say.
We'll save the best for last.
Yeah, okay. All right. Good. So you start. Oh, you say yours is the best, even though mine's the big stuff. All right. Okay. So I'll get rolling with some Star Trek news. Here we go. So this bit comes to us from Giant Freaking Robot again. Okay. This is the website that, before was saying that Lower Decks was the greatest Star Trek in decades and all that stuff.
Okay. So take it with a grain of salt.
Well, it's sort of, but like they were giving us the scuttlebutt about, about Kurtzman and the relationship with Paramount not being good and that sort of thing.
Sorry, a grain of Andorian salt.
Andorian salt. But they claim in this article, that this information comes to them from the same source that allowed them to be the first outlet anywhere to break the news that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is happening. So the word is Paramount is no longer in the business of making Star Trek movies.
What?
Yeah. So you remember a couple episodes back, we had this thing that said that Star Trek 4 was on hold.
Mm-hmm.
And the director was gonna go do something else. I was like, yeah, it's over, right? Because once you get on hold and your director goes off to do something else, it takes a miracle for that project to happen again. Well, no, apparently not only is Star Trek 4 not happening, but there are no plans. Like every other plan we have heard talked about for Star Trek movies has been scuttled.
Wow.
Yeah. They see it as more as a television property and aren't willing to invest in future Star Trek movies anymore. If one of the shows on CBS takes off, that could change, but those shows aren't generating enough interest.
Ouch.
Wow. Ouch. I mean, they're generating a lot of interest for me. I'm interested.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do a show every week.
Right. And
So,
I wonder how much of that, Star Trek has never been it's people who love it, but it's never been a widely appreciated, not on the level of Star Wars or the MCU sort of a thing. It's almost a little more nichey.
It is. I think that's true. It's definitely huge. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that there is. But yeah, I mean, it's always a little.
It doesn't have that. I would say the dedicated fan base is probably the same size as all of the others, but it doesn't. I mean, and that's a pure guess on my part, but it doesn't have the same box office draw that lightsabers and superheroes do.
Right. It doesn't have the same broad appeal. It never has. And I mean, that's really true. I mean, that's why Star Trek production in the early days, right? Well, not just the early days, like original series, animated series, but particularly in the movies, because much of the same production team worked on from the movies on through Next Generation, on through those 18 years of television and Star Trek. A lot of the same people were involved.
Shoot, so were same sets. They reused the Enterprise from Star Trek 6 as the battle bridge in Encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly where I was going with that. That there are walls that are in the Enterprise in the motion picture that are a part of the Enterprise in Next Generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And so yeah, and I mean they were saving stuff, they were reusing stuff because they never got a huge budget. Like the biggest budget they had was I want to say something like 35 million or something, which
For
I
the
mean
films.
that's for the films. And I mean
Wow.
that's 1986 money, but even
True.
still, that's or whatever it was. But really, you go into even the later films, right? You're getting all the way to like 2002, I think, was when Nemesis came out. The budgets, as I recall, it's been a while since I looked it up, but the budgets didn't change that much. Like it was usually around 35 million. And so even as other blockbusters and whatever were like increasing and there was always that thing that every time there was a Star Trek movie made, they thought it was the last one. Every time, even though we have this de facto trilogy in 2, 3, and 4, they still didn't think there was going to be another Star Trek every time. And so so this is kind of not surprising in a certain sense, because it's not, they've been throwing a ton of money at Star Trek movies and they've been doing well,
right.
But I think because the Star Trek television is so big right now, honestly, I think it would be a bad idea to make Star Trek movies right now.
Yeah, to me, a Star Trek movie is a capstone on a series,
Yeah.
Like you've done your whole series, you've come to love the characters, and then you give them a few movies and they're done.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think you do kind of migrate from the TV to movie. The Kelvin Timeline Pictures is the first time we've had Star Trek movies that went straight to the screen with a brand new cast. Which is, I think, one of the reasons people had a hard time accepting. But of course, we both love them. We know they're, except for the second one, we know they're great. And it's a fantastic cast and everything. And I was looking forward to another adventure with them, but after Anton's death and just beyond feeling so culminating, it just,
It
it's okay.
is, if
I'm
we
ready to
never
let
get
it go.
anything more of Chris Pine Kirk, it is a good conclusion it is a good arc for him.
It really is. In fact, I was just going through, I think I mentioned this last episode, I was going through my chapter on Star Trek Beyond, and his character's story really does come full circle. It really does echo and come around to something great in that third film, and it's fantastic. Anyway, but point is, the Paramount's not making Star Trek movies right now, and I think that's actually a good thing. Every single idea that I've heard for a Star Trek movie has made me cringe.
Yeah,
every single one.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. Star Trek, I think, does some of its best work in the television genre, where it's got a little bit of room to breathe and be its own thing without having to try and get that broader appeal.
No,
let it do its own thing.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And I'm not sure, at least at this moment, that you can do something as niche as Star Trek, as big as you have to do it, to do sci-fi or whatever. And but maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know. But I think there's so much going on in the TV world that you're already threatening to kind of oversaturate the market with Star Trek just with TV. So a movie is just a bad idea right now. So. Yeah, okay. I think I read it as good news. I'm because it's like we dodged the Tarantino bullet, so I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, if they're not making any more movies for the time being, it's good to know that the books are still going on. I haven't read a whole lot of the books lately, and I know they're not canon in the same way that Star Wars literature is canon to their universe.
Oh well, not anymore.
I'm sorry,
not anymore. With the
new
movies, they obliterated the entire.
No. They've restarted the canon literature. Yeah, there's new literature that is canon to the Star Wars universe.
I see. I wasn't aware of that. See, I'm a Trekkie, so I'm not supposed to know that stuff,
I understand.
So.
I'm a man of many tastes. I am a Renaissance Trekkie. I'm a Renaissance star, a Renaissance fan. I don't know. Anyways, go ahead. So there's going to be 2 new Star Trek books that are exploring some legacy female characters. The first one is by Alex R. White, and I don't know anything about these authors. I just came across this article today on sci-fi.com. Apparently it's an exclusive of theirs.
Link in the description.
Yes, link will be in the doobly-doo. Yeah. Alex R. White is writing or is releasing a book called Revenant. featuring Jadzia Dax and Kira Nerys.
Nice.
Yeah, and then Cassandra Rose Clark has written Shadows Have Offended, by featuring Deanna Troi, Beverly Crusher, and Worf. It's going to be set during the 7th season of TNG.
Nice.
These are both released from Gallery Books Simon and Schuster.
Cool. So you could take that book with Deanna and Beverly and Worf and just substitute it in your mind for one of the really crappy episodes of season 7, like Sub Rosa, because that's a Beverly story anyway. So let's.
That's the one they quoted it in, or referenced in. Yes.
Getting ahead of ourselves, but in this week's episode of Lower Decks, yes.
So we'll close out this news segment with a perfect casting.
Okay.
Apparently, according to Trek Movie, and this is a couple weeks old. This article is from September 8th, but they have announced another casting for Star Trek Discovery Season 3, a character by the name of Grudge.
Grudge.
Being played by Liu, the cat, is a Maine Coon. And, Star Trek has a long history, a long storied history with cats.
Yes.
And so I'm very excited to see the next cat in the Star Trek
but who's
legacy
cat?
Here. I'm sorry?
Who's cat?
We'll just have to watch and find out.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
Like, there is no, I mean.
Oh, no, it does, excuse me, the article does actually tell you who the cat is a pet of.
But you don't want to say it because it's a spoiler?
Well, I mean, it could be if you haven't watched any of the trailers or commercials.
Like me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. It's not a cat of one of the 2 new characters that we've talked about.
What 2 new characters have we talked about?
Well, you weren't here that week.
Oh. What 2 new characters did y'all talk about?
The casting of Lou Del Barrio and Ian, I forgot his last name, as the two new characters. This.
Oh, right. Yes, no, not those 2. This
not one of them.
No, okay. This one is a character that has been. It's a new character, but he was announced, I think, a long time ago.
Okay, all right. You know what? I don't want to know whose cat it is.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably for the best.
Go out on a limb like a cat?
Uh-huh.
What was that laugh?
Wow. Do we need to cut that maybe?
No, that's fine. Somebody is going to hear that, and I'm gonna be picked up for some cartoon voice work because of that.
Oh, well.
You're looking well, you're not looking, but you're listening to the next Bullwinkle.
Oh my.
Oh my. I could get some George Takei voice work by saying that. So anyway, San Francisco. I was born there.
So moving right along, dropping down to those lower decks.
Come on, you're not gonna admire my stellar George Takei impression.
Stellar. It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay to be Takei. I love that. Okay. That's a great movie, by the way. If our audience has not seen the film To Be Takei, that is a great movie. If you just want to love George Takei more than you ever thought you could,
what about if one of our hosts hasn't seen To Be Takei?
Well, you haven't?
I mean, hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically?
Maybe?
You need to
How much higher can I go?
Well, we don't need to go higher. We need to go lower.
Oh.
To the lower decks.
All right. So we killed a good 5 minutes of the discussion time we've allocated for lower decks. Oh, I'm kidding. I have no idea. Yeah. I wasn't timing that.
That's okay. So lower decks. Veritas.
Veritas. What does Veritas means something, right? What does it mean?
Veritas means truth.
Truth, yeah.
So Veritas, I was about to say vi findest du das.
Yeah, I don't know what that
means. Wie findest du die Veritas?
I need that in Captain Dummy speak, Kaylee.
That's in German. That's how did you like it? What did you think of it? Wie findest du?
It was okay.
It was okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't. There were a few moments where I laughed to my nose again.
Yeah.
There was one point that kind of got me good. I
Yeah.
can't remember what it was though. Beth and I made contact and we actually chuckled a little.
That's funny. It was so good you can't remember it because
I
you were
know,
laughing
right?
so hard you blew a brain cell.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't have many
yeah.
of those to spare.
Hey, speak for yourself. Um,
I was.
that's true. You were. So clearly, I don't have many either because I can't really keep up with you. Um,
That's fair.
that's fair. I was not. I didn't. Really latch onto the episode that much.
Mhm.
It was interesting how they made specific reference to the Klingons and then put our characters in such a Klingon space.
Mhm.
Like it's very much Star Trek 6
Right.
kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
obvious. I mean, it's an obvious and intentional callback, right?
Uh-huh. I saw
But
someone on Reddit postulate that it was a Klingon conquered world, but Klingon
mm,
minority.
yeah, maybe so. Something like that. Yeah, because it has kind of a Klingon name. The planet is like something. I don't remember
something
I don't
something
remember the
prime,
name of the
right?
planet. Yeah, but it's something with it's got an apostrophe in it, so it looks Klingon. Um, I mean, or Vulcan, but it doesn't
Mhm.
start with a V or a K, so it doesn't.
Right.
Not a K, but a V. You know what's funny about Vulcan about Klingon?
What's that?
There's so many things. It's called Klingon, right? And there's so many
Mhm.
things that have K in it, like Tukuvma and things like that.
Right.
But there's not actually a K sound in Klingon.
How do they pronounce Kronos?
I believe well because it's a Q, it's a
Right.
QU, and so it's like
QO.
Chronos. It's like a guttural sound. It's like
It's
Chronos,
it's
like
it's
like Kales
mhm.
is Kalesh,
Okay.
Kalesh, and like they never say it right up until Discovery, and but like Klingon is Thlingon, it's Thlingon, it's not Klingon.
Oh,
So there you go.
interesting.
That's how much the episode of Lower Decks was interesting for us. We're already on to minutia about
Right.
Klingon
Klingon
pronunciation.
pronunciation, yeah.
I liked what Boimler said. I mean, I liked Boimler's speech.
Hmm.
I thought that was really cool, and I think that reflects something in our current culture that we kind of like knowing that people aren't perfect and stuff.
Hmm.
um some of the positive feedback I get for this show is about you
Uh-oh.
because you will not let me fix stuff and trip me up and get in my way and then or let me trip myself up and get in my own way and then not help me fix it because you're just like keeping it real and people appreciate that. So
Oh, well, I'm
and
glad to hear that.
yeah, I'm just saying people. I'm not saying me. I'm saying people.
Right.
There are
And I
people
would
out
just
there.
like to point out then that, see, I was right.
And I would just like to point out then that I set myself up for that.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, right. This was not a stellar episode for me. I don't like I don't like being like kind of out of the loop for that much of the episode.
Yeah, and that's how I felt about the twist with the disabled ship, the
Yeah,
farm.
and I've gone back and thought about that a little bit more too, and I'm less happy with that episode than I was, I think. But we can talk about that in just a second. But the twist, yeah, that's one thing. The twist is like, let's not do this again because you're gonna be like the comedy M. Night Shyamalan if you're not careful.
Once or twice, spread it out. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
fine. Some people appreciate that. It can be used well. I just,
But it doesn't need to be every episode. That's
yeah.
going to get really old. But it wasn't that so much as the stuff kept happening and it was so random and disjointed and you couldn't see how it connected. But it wasn't just that you couldn't see how it connected like overall. It's like you couldn't see how it was connected even vaguely. And that started wearing on me. And I was like, it was kind of funny with the Gorn and stuff. I mean, and what's his name? What's Cyborg Kid's name? I've known it for
Uh,
weeks.
shoot.
Rutherford. Is it Rutherford?
Rutherford, yes.
I kept wanting to say Rutherford, but I second guessed myself.
No,
So
you're right.
with Rutherford's implant, which I thought was pretty funny.
I did like
and
that
good.
gag. I liked the reboot gag there where he wakes up and he doesn't know what he's been doing. That was kind of clever. I
But at
like
the same time, that does lean on something that's been a bit of a trope throughout the series, which is we're in a hurry, do this right now. No, we really can't because we'll no time to explain, do it now. And then of course it goes wrong because nobody listened.
Right.
And so that also is wearing a little thin too. So it's like, but this was a good occurrence of it. I mean, it went well and it was funny. And the one time Rutherford wanted his suit to his implant to blink off, it did, and then it came back and he was no better off. So that was good and that was fine. But I think the heart of it for me was really Boimler's speech, which is not necessarily a new idea, but it's still a cool thing and a thing that I agree with, that showing faults and showing imperfections can actually help increase people's respect for you, and because they know that you're real.
Right.
And the idea of sort of the icon of the perfect hero is getting to be something we don't trust. And so I think that says something about our culture, and it's probably a good thing, right? That we're at that space
where we don't just take things at face value and put them up on a pedestal.
Yeah. We want more authenticity. And I don't know if this originates with him or not, but I read it in a book by a Dominican, I think he's Dominican monk, called Brother Bennett Tveden, and he said, "A saint is just a sinner revised and edited."
I like that. I like that.
And so yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I kind of hold that in my mind.
And it reminds me of when we were watching the Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we had the discussion or if it was just on that opening title card where it was, there's so much out there exploring Jesus's divinity and not nearly as much exploring his humanity.
Oh yeah.
And that the fact that we do have Jesus up on this cross pedestal, but he was also human, and I'm sure he made some mistakes. And I don't know, do you think he made mistakes, or is that sacrilegious?
I don't know. It depends on what kind of mistake you're talking about, and it depends on your view of atonement, and it depends on your understanding of what the scriptures mean when they say, that he was tempted in every way. In Hebrews, he was tempted in every way as anyone was, but yet without sin. So what crosses the line into sin, and what's just a flub. And that's something that a lot of people have not really wanted to go into, but I think I think it was probably a conversation we had after the film. I was talking about screenwriter Paul Schrader saying that we could be criticized for going too far and making Jesus too human in this movie, and that's probably a fair criticism. But it's also a fair criticism to say that Jesus has probably been too divine heretofore. I'm paraphrasing. That Jesus has probably been too divine heretofore, and therefore this is kind of it's okay to go a little far in the human aspect because somebody needs to talk about it, basically. And it's okay because it's a counterbalance. We're trying to counterbalance like a ton of too much divine to try to inject at least some humanity into Jesus, which I appreciate. We can talk about that on a different podcast, because we're talking about Star Trek here. How about that, Tim? Man, you took it from a comedy Star Trek cartoon show to the Last Temptation of Christ. Jeez,
well, what can I say? That's what I'm here for, is to mess things up and not let you fix them.
That's a gap you bridged right there, man.
This is how my mind works. Mind the gap.
That's heavy. You get heavy quick. But anyway, yeah. So it was.
Is there something about the Earth's gravitational pull in the future?
Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull? What? Never mind. We have to get your brother to that dance anyway. So, great stuff. That's good. I think. And if you guys have any episodes, have any thoughts? Oh, I did want to go back and talk about the previous episode. I've really been thinking a lot and listening to a lot of people regarding like rights and equality for disabled people, and just how much, I mean, there really is, like, I mean, you can call it like a tax on the disabled, or how expensive it is to be disabled, and and just the things that people have to overcome. And I'm thinking back on that episode, and I think I hope that, and I need to rewatch the episode again, but I hope that the point of this episode is to help people like get healed from this weird stuff that's happened to them. Not that we can't make space in our society for people who are severely disabled.
Right. And that, as you say that, it does make me kind of think like the Starfleet solution is to just ship them off to a farm out of the way where they can just live out their life in luxury. What if what they want is to be a productive member of society? Who are we to just ship them off,
Yeah, that's the thing for me, is like, is there no integration available? And is there no, and I know we're probably taking a cartoon show a little too seriously, maybe, but maybe not.
But,
I don't know.
But people are saying this is, Star Trek the way it's supposed to be, or it's the best Star Trek that's out right now. Is
One
what they're
guy
saying.
said that.
Yeah,
but
then it's got to live up to that.
Yeah, I mean, are you hearing other people say that it's like the best?
No. Well, I mean, it seems to be pretty popular.
Really?
At least on Reddit, I think.
Well, yeah, on Twitter and stuff, but
yeah,
it's all that's on right now. It's all we have. So
true.
It's and so I do wonder about that episode. And I do wonder about what that episode says about how this, if we consider these people severely disabled, like how the severely disabled can function in a society where, I mean, are we used to accommodating that much disability? I think of Melora and Deep Space Nine. I think of I'm trying to think of others. Well, there's that trio of folks in Deep Space Nine that Dr. Bashir works with. And there is sort of a shoving people off to the side that, I don't know.
Yeah, and again, it's our it's our not understanding. We can't understand what they could want.
Well, and there again, I mean, even just as you're saying that, it's we and they.
Right. Yeah.
It's
no,
like
that's true.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
is the assumption even is that the people making the Star Trek are not disabled.
That's fair.
So I read somebody put it this way recently. They said, if you wear corrective lenses of any kind, you have a disability. It's not normal. It's not okay. And you can't function without your corrective lenses. That's a disability that you can't see clearly. It's just that your disability as a person who can't see clearly is fully accommodated in our culture. It's pretty easy to get a pair of glasses or a pair of contacts and function. Right. And so there's space made for you, and there's accommodation made for you, and you can go. And so, just in that little thing, because I mean, everybody in my family wears glasses. Everybody, right?
Yeah, mine too.
And so it's just like, man, you just don't think about it, even as a disability. And what other disabilities could there be that we wouldn't think about if we accommodated them better, so it's just something that's on my mind, and I just wanted to make sure that we didn't sound like we had a cavalier attitude toward the issues that episode could potentially raise in that regard. And also, did we really need more threshold salamanders? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it does make it just that much harder to pretend like that episode never happened.
It is. That's absolutely right. But what there are two people in the chair that Pike gets in the menagerie with the beep, and gosh, I think that leads us right into our discussion of Star Trek Discovery and Pike's Peak.
Is one of your better segues.
Hey man, I have nailed a couple of segues today. I just want to say, I think I have. Went higher to lower, and now the Pike segue. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, sure.
I just think you're never gonna like a segue that I do. That's just
Uh,
it.
I mean, they do feel a little forced.
You think yours don't? Oh my gosh. All
No,
right.
mine are
So
perfect in
okay. All
every
right.
way.
Good. Fine. Let us know what you think, audience at home. Who has the better transitions, me or Tim? And is it that mine are worse, or that Tim just always has to try to call him out? Am I just too generous to Tim?
Well, I mean, for all the times you've steamrolled me on the
Oh
audio
my gosh, with the
commentaries.
steamrolling. Oh my gosh.
So Pike's Peak, yes, and we're not talking
Pike's
about a
Peak.
receding hairline.
We're not. No, we're not. We're not talking about a mountain. It is Peek.
He's got good hair actually.
Yeah, he
I
does.
like,
He does. He
and
has
some
great
mount
hair.
and some mount has some hair.
He has some
Good head of
enviable hair, and he's got it grown out now, and with
Yeah,
a
on the
beard. And good night, he's just gorgeous no matter what he does. Anyway, so I'm just saying, Anson Mount is one of the best looking actors working right now. I'm just saying. And he's playing Pike, and that's just great. But yeah, we did want to talk about Pike, and for those who are just listening to this and you're not seeing it laid out, the episode title is Pike's Peak, Peek. And it's obviously a pun, and because it's a pun, Tim decided it was absolutely irresistible as a title. When I suggested it, there was no going back. And but we're going to get to that in just a minute. Like, that's kind of the culmination, I think, of what we're talking about, because we want to stem off of what we were talking about last week regarding New Eden, right?
Mhm.
And the discussion of Pike and how he fits in this universe of discovery regarding like religion and faith and mystery and all those kinds of things. And the first thing for me is that, I mean, he does seem more comfortable with religion than the people around him, right?
Mhm.
We talked about that conversation that he had with Owo and Michael.
Yeah.
What's that character's name? Right.
Only the main character.
You know, there was a time years ago when I forgot Humphrey Bogart's name for like 2 weeks. I couldn't think of it. So, you know, hey, it happens. This episode kind of hits at a place for me that is uncomfortable and weird, and that I'm not super comfy with. I just said it's uncomfortable, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But, and that is, you know, you remember back in the Lower Decks episode with the koala line that I love. Which one is that? With the guy who is ascending. Do you remember which one that is?
Which episode it was?
Yeah.
No, it was the one with the guy ascending.
It was the one with the guy ascending. Whatever. We all know the other one. The one. The universe is balanced on the back of a giant koala. Why is he smiling? What does he know? That's one of my favorite lines in all of Star Trek right there. I love that. But that episode, you know, Tendi makes this comment. You know, she's going around trying to come up with all these things to do to get this guy to ascend. And it's not unlike things that we've seen in Star Trek before, where like we'll do religious stuff. Like, it's okay as long as we can recognize that there's a real effect that's happening. You know, like Spock's Katra being put back into his body. I mean, it's an act of faith for Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise to engage in this religious thing, you know, ceremony on this planet. It's an act of faith for them to engage in that, but they do it because of their love of Spock, and it works. You know, it's a religious ceremony, and it works. And it's like in Where No One Has Gone Before in TNG, when everybody's like, okay, focus your positive energy and your positive thoughts on the traveler, you know, like, let's have a ship-wide prayer session, you know, and it works because that's what we had to do right there, you know. But what Tendi says, and she says, is something along the lines of, I've heard that you'll ascend faster if you do all the religions at once. You know, like if you put all the religious traditions together at once, then you'll ascend faster. And which is funny, right? I mean, it's kind of a throw off line. It's kind of funny and it's kind of interesting, but it says something about Star Trek and how it wants to sort of, when it talks about religions, it wants to be very like multi-faith, right? And there's a way of being multi-faith that gives all faiths their space, which is what we strive for in the United States, right? And in most of the free world, what we strive for, which is religious freedom, pluralism, which is a topic for another day, maybe, or no, maybe I'll talk about it here. That Christians should be in favor of pluralism, but and should foster a pluralistic society. Um, but there's a kind of pluralism that I think is reflected in that thing that Tendi says, and also in New Eden, where it's like, well, let's just mush all the religions into one.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a problem with that. I really do. I really feel like, I don't know. I have a problem with that practice. It's a practice. It's a thing people actually do, right? It exists in our world. It's not a thing that's invented for Star Trek. But I feel like, I think it's an action that seeks to sort of like solidify or like if we cross the streams, or we all Care Bear stare in the same direction, like it'll make this one big, powerful thing. I don't think when you combine religions in that way that you actually create something more powerful. I think what it ends up doing is diluting all the religions.
It's not a Voltron effect.
No, it's not exactly Voltron. Great example. Yes, it's not Voltron. I think when you try to join them all together, you end up diluting them all, and I think it dilutes the whole thing overall, because it can't say very much about what this means, or what's important, or who God is, or what my relationship to God is. Because all these different faiths and all these different traditions have different understandings of that. And yeah, in a lot of ways, they may be seeking after the same goals, but they do have different ways of getting there. And those differences are important. It's kind of like, how it was trendy a few years ago to say that you're colorblind?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like
And
about
looking
race.
at people,
I
about
even
race.
remember working at a Christian bookstore, and we had this shirt that we sold, and I hated it. It was all these different colored faces, like happy faces.
Mm-hmm.
And it said God is colorblind. And it was trying to say that, like, God wants racial equality and whatever. And what I really appreciated at the time was DC Talk's song Colored People on their record Jesus Freak in 1995, where they said, we're all colored people, but our colors, whatever, and they're talking metaphorically, and also our skin, they call us a skin kaleidoscope, which I think is great. Saying that we are different from one another. Our skins are different. Our colors are different. Our colors are different, not just in our physical colors, but also in how we're colored by our experiences and our mistakes. And that's what makes us beautiful. And to be colorblind is to say that God does not appreciate the diversity of his own creation.
It's also to say he's blind to
reality.
To reality, to what different colors face.
Exactly. And so it's the same kind of thing with this homogenization of religion that we see in this episode. It's like, you're not honoring all these different faiths by trying to merge them all together. You're really just, you're muting them, right? They're not louder together, they're quieter. Jesus is in the window, but it's at the back of the room with the Star of David and with the other religion-specific stuff. And our real religion is the Red Angel and the stuff that happened and the story that we tell in our windows, right? About this thing that happened. There's nothing wrong with telling stories in windows. There's nothing wrong with that being your narrative that you gather around, right? But I don't think, there are no angels in Wicca. How do the Wiccans feed into this? This is not a kind of thing that pagans believe in at all. So how does this happen? And somehow the pagans are like, oh yeah, that reflects our religion some weird way that it doesn't possibly, So to me, it just is a very it's a well-intentioned a direction, but I don't think it works. I don't think it really honors those different faiths. I think it hurts them. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to, from anthropological point of view, trying to decide if that's something that would naturally happen. Like if you've got a group of people from a diverse religious selection, and they're just immediately transported out of nuclear annihilation to a almost a paradise-like planet, who would they ascribe that to? Would they fall apart after that, saying, no, it was Jesus, no, it was Buddha, no, it was Moses? I mean, how would they naturally proceed from there, given our propensity to divide and try and explain? And I know this gets into that aspect of religion is only used to explain the unexplained.
There is a certain gathering, a certain melding, and people have tried to do amalgams of different faiths. I mean, I was just watching a film the other day about St. Augustine. And Augustine, for a while as a young man, followed the Manichaean tradition, and or the Manichaean religion. And Manichaeanism was trying to take, I think it was Judaism and Zoroastrianism, and he was like three different like competing religions, and say no, they're all one, right? And that was and that became not only a faith tradition that he left, but then as he became a Christian, he began really fighting against the Manichaeans and really trying to poke holes in what they were doing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not a new idea, and it's something that people have tried, and something that some people do when it's trying to meld all these traditions into one. I've always found that to feel kind of contrived and to ultimately weaken the traditions it's trying to combine. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. And I think it's important because, we do tell certain stories, and I mean, particularly as Christians, we do tell certain stories, and we have those stories, and Jews have certain stories, and Christians can miss the point of Jewish stories in their sort of Christianizing of them, and in so doing, I think, miss their own Christianity, like miss a more Christian perspective, because our faith arises out of Judaism. So the better we understand Judaism, the better we can put those stories and those ideas in conversation with who Jesus is, right? And not by co-opting, but by seeking to understand. So like I have friends who talk about Star Trek from a Jewish perspective, just like I talk about it from a Christian perspective, and I love listening to them. I love reading their stuff because it's like, oh wow, like not only does that give me better insight into Star Trek, but it gives me better insight into Judaism, and therefore it gives me better insight into how I'm relating things to my faith tradition, and that to me, putting things in conversation to me is better than homogenizing everything. Does that make sense? And homogeneity is very much a criticism that people have of Star Trek. That a lot of what shows up as unity in Star Trek really comes from homogeneity, from losing distinctiveness, which is a very Borg thing to do.
Nice. Well, if we keep going about this, we're going to have to change the title of the episode.
Okay, yeah, all right, you're right. Okay, because I'm not talking about Pike specifically. You're right. His dad did teach comparative religions, though, so there you go. But comparative religion seems to be a place where Star Trek is pretty comfy with religion. But the thing about Pike is we talk about Pike's Peak, that's referring to something specific in the title. But he also does give us a peek, doesn't he, of a little more religious or spiritual attitude, right?
It's like he's approaching it with an open mind, with the mind of a scientist, that his mind can be changed.
Very good. See, I like that because
It's like,
Go ahead.
It reminds me of an Albert Einstein quote, actually, that science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind.
Now, I wonder if that's it. Now, are you sure that's a real Albert Einstein quote?
I am not. No.
Okay.
Like Lincoln said, you got to be careful of quotes on the internet.
Right, exactly. Use the force, Harry. Yeah, no. But it's a good quotation one way or the other, and I think you're right. Um, it's not just that. It's not just that. But I think you're bang on that he's approaching it like a scientist, like a real scientist who doesn't try to presume that they know before they go in. And I think that's where he's kind of teaching Michael a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrating something to Michael a little bit that she doesn't have. She is a pretty strict dogmatist, right? She doesn't even want to say that the building is a church.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I think, that shows, yeah, I think it does. It shows an inquiry. It shows a curiosity. It shows an openness that maybe, at least in this particular realm, Michael lacks. And for what reason she has this prejudice in her thinking, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure that'll be explained at any given point, but it is the way she is. But there's a concept called God of the Gaps. Have you heard of this before?
Yes.
Okay. Some people
But
have, some people have. What's
just
that?
for the people who
For the
haven't,
people who
why don't
haven't,
you go ahead and
and
explain
it's,
it?
yeah, I wanted to explain. One of those things that you may have heard, right? But you haven't heard that name. And it's basically the idea that, science explains stuff to a certain point, and then to the point where that explanation falls off, people say, aha, therein lies God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't tell me what caused the Big Bang, so haha, God,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with saying that there's mystery to God. There's nothing wrong with saying that God lives in mysteries and things. However, if your God is only God of the gaps, then the only thing it takes to get rid of your God is closing a gap. Every time somebody explains away something that you think is mysterious, they make your God smaller. And that's because you've made your God smaller in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of brought this up last time with Nibiru and stuff in Star Trek, and it's a little hard to articulate, but it's this idea that religion only exists to try to explain or put a name on those things that our reason or direct evidence can't tell us, like what happens after we die, or the meaning and purpose of our lives, or the origin of the universe and things like that. And so a lot of religious people become very anti-science because they feel like science, in trying to explain things about the world, is intruding on their territory.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. The more you explain, the more you shrink their God. It's just, I had a friend say recently, I hear some people, talking in a particular forum. It doesn't matter which one, but I hear people talking in this place, and in this context, and I just want to yell, "Your God is too small."
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Gene Roddenberry was all about. He believed that the conception of God that he grew up with was too small, and he was right. I mean, he was really right. There are things about the nature and character of God, and the vastness and the enormity of God that the terrible swift sword just doesn't cover. We have to have something other than a God of the gaps. You have to be able to recognize that, yes, God is the God of the gaps, but God is also the God of everything the gaps are in between. And part of this conversation about God being the God of what is, and not just what we wish, and not just what we hope, or not just what we can't explain, is that what is not always easy. what is not always wondrous. You know, there's suffering and there's pain and there's struggle in our lives. And God is not separate from that. God is not abandoning us when that happens. And we don't need, people talk about Star Trek getting dark, but man, if you can tell, Billy Crockett, a musician that I love quite a lot, once said that truth and art can be explained one of two ways, either by telling something that is genuinely hopeful, or by something that's bleak, that leaves a hole the shape of what's clearly missing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The brightest light is shown to be bright by the darkness it dispels. And so if we can still tell stories that find that thread of hope, and that find that thread of the good, the true, and the beautiful in a Star Trek that goes some really dark places, all the better. Because we're living in a time where I question whether my kids should be listening to the news broadcast that comes on the television.
Mm-hmm.
Because what does it say about humanity to him, and how can I buoy up his faith and his hope that it's worth living, it's worth living, and it's worth trying another day. And so, but the Christian ethic, I think, the Christian perspective tells us not only that God is not separate from us in our suffering, but that suffering is somehow important to becoming a better version of ourselves. Not because of the suffering itself, but just because it's necessary. That it's what gets us to the other side. And I think a Christian view of the world doesn't polish it off, and doesn't say that things are pretty and things are nice when they're not. It doesn't tell lies like that. It tells the truth, and it embraces suffering, because we live under the rule and reign of a God whose whole function as savior of humankind is the embrace of suffering. And there we get to the title of this episode.
Although it does make me think, and complete tangent, we have neither the time nor the depth to cover it right now, but Star Trek V, the movie that I'm convinced to find so much material out of, where Kirk, I like my pain. I need my suffering. Yeah.
I need my pain. Yeah. Yeah. We could talk about that another time.
Another time, yes.
But the point of this episode, the heart of this episode is Pike's Peak. And it's about Pike's look forward. It's the episode Through the Valley of Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
When Pike goes to obtain the time crystal, and when he takes hold of it, he sees his future, and we know about that future, right? Because we saw it in the menagerie. We saw him confined to the wheelchair, unable to speak, badly damaged, and we know that he gained those injuries in a selfless act to try to save his crew. And Pike sees that suffering that's ahead of him. Pike sees that sacrifice that he's going to make if he keeps going down this road. He sees that future that's before him. And he's like, look, this is one of many possibilities, and maybe it won't happen. But if it does happen, I'm all for it. I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter. I can't let that change, who I'm going to be between now and then. I've got to go forward doing what I think is right. And a good friend of mine made the comment that this is a Christ-like moment for Chris Pike. That he is willing to accept something like this, that he's willing to give himself in this way, that he's willing to embrace this kind of pain and suffering. And she's like, it's like Christ in Gethsemane, right? Who says first, take this cup from me, but then, you know what? Not my will, but your will be done. I know what's ahead of me, and I will embrace it. I will take it anyway. And that is so noble. I mean, if there's anything I can say about Chris Pike in this iteration, it's his nobility. I've liked Chris Pike as a character, as a concept, as a person, more with each iteration, from Jeff Hunter to Bruce Greenwood to Anson Mount. He has just become a better and more interesting and more noble character. And it's that nobility about him that I so admire. And in that moment, I think we really see his nobility, and we see his character of self-sacrifice. And that's the character of Christ. And that's the character that isn't the God of the gaps, that isn't that doesn't say, yes, well, there's going to be a happy ending somehow, because the little Dove chocolates, they have different sayings inside of them, and most of them are stupid. And one of the more stupid ones says, everybody has a happy ending. If you're not happy, it's not the end. And I'm just like,
Nice.
Yeah, there are a million people I could say, tell that to, tell that the person who died this way or that way. And, no, and I mean, really from a Christian perspective, from a telos of creation perspective,
right.
yes, there is a happy ending, if you will, that all of creation has. But I don't think that's what they're saying.
No.
And it certainly doesn't read that way. And it's certainly not the truth. There is pain and there is suffering, and, and there's not always an easy answer for that. There's not always, it's just part of living in this place. It's part of living in this time, and it's part of growing, and it's part of becoming, and it's part of being human. And I think God in Christ tells us that pain and suffering is not something to run away from, but it's something to embrace and to go through, because ultimately, there is purpose in the universe. Because ultimately, God is worthy of our trust. Even if right now, when our story ends, things don't look good. Our story isn't the only story, and there's a much larger narrative going on. There's a much larger story going on of which we're a part. And not only does Christ show us that, but Christ shows us also that God is with us in suffering, and that he's not distant, he's not far. God is not distant, God is not far. God is right there with us. And I think that's important. That's good. I like it, because we are well out of time. So
Yeah, we should move on. Don't we have some Q&A to cover, or are we going to skip that today?
It is interesting. And I'll just go here, because this is something that's kind of an old question and kind of a new question. Because it comes from a conversation that I was having with somebody who was talking to me about Christ figures in Star Trek, because I talk about Spock as a Christ figure in the first book. Obviously, in the next book, I'll be talking about Data as a Christ figure, and there are other Christ figures in Star Trek. And I've been talking recently about how irritating it's been to keep finding Christ figures in Star Trek. Because I'm like, I had one and I was happy. I had two and I was like, this is cool. I had three and I was like, all right, great. Okay. I got 3 Christ figures, and with them, I can give you a really detailed and rich vision of Christology. This is enough. And then I found another, and I'm like, okay, now it's just getting annoying. And so Chris Pike was the most recent, for me anyway, in this particular context. And as usual, it took somebody pointing it out to me for me to see it. And they were talking about, well, okay, so what is a Christ figure, right? Like she's like, it's like this, it's sort of this thing in fundamentalist tradition, especially, but I think as across Christendom in general, that we have a tendency to reduce Christ to like the cross, right? Or
Yep.
that's the main thing that we talk about. You were talking about a cross pedestal earlier, which I thought was really interesting. But that is sort of what we center around. And like, what about these other aspects of Jesus and like who Jesus is? Like it's important for us to focus on those things as Christians, like what he said and what he did and what he taught and what he meant.
Right.
and what he calls us to, like the cross again, like the cross, we see it as like that old image of the, the bridge to heaven or whatever, and
Mhm.
it's about where we go when we die.
Right. It's about us.
Right, but the question is, how should we then live? How do we live? What's here? What is not just Christ saving us from hell, right? If you go down that road, or have that concept, but what is Christ saving us to? What is Christ saving us for? Not just at the end of life, but now, during our lives. Why are we here living a life?
Mhm.
If the point is where we end up. The point is not where we end up. That's not the goal. Oh man, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So the idea was like, okay, so can there be Christ figures who represent other parts of Jesus? And I want to say yes. I want to say yes, because she's right that, like, we need to. First of all, I think we need to unpack the significance of the cross more greatly, in terms of like more than just a ticket to heaven,
Mhm.
where it's not any problem with the cross itself. It's a reductionist view of the cross. But also, like, a Christ figure could be, like we talk about with Chris Pike.
Mhm.
I
Right.
mean, is he even that Christ figure angle for him is possible, right? But does it, and it related back, I remember, to something that a person was talking about. They were writing a paper, and they were quoting me in the paper
Oh, nice.
about Christ figures, and I was like, ooh, I didn't state myself very well on that, because I really don't think, because they were talking about Surak, in Vulcan history, right? They were
Mhm.
talking about Surak as a Christ figure, and I was like, yeah, I really don't think he is, because, and I was like, I really think a Christ figure really has to reflect the atonement of Christ, really has to reflect, like, that death and resurrection and everything, because there are lots of people who are kind, there are lots of people who are giving, there are lots of people who are great moral leaders, there are lots of people who are prophets, there are lots of people who teach us, the same sorts of things that Jesus teaches us. That doesn't necessarily make them Christ figures. You have to talk about what makes Christ distinctive and unique. And later, as I thought about Surak even more, what I realized was the reason Surak is not a Christ figure is that Surak is a Moses figure. Surak is a Mosaic figure. He's very much more like Moses than like Jesus, both in his role in their history and in their culture, and also in just the general nature of the fact that I really believe the Vulcans are just encoded as Jews. The Vulcans are just Jewish. They just are. And I think the Bajorans pretty much are too. Um,
Huh.
but
No, I hadn't
well,
thought of
they're
that.
they're both. I mean, they're both, and especially in the Kelvin timeline. The Kelvin timeline gives Vulcans a diaspora, right, which they hadn't
Well,
really had before.
I mean,
Um,
I can definitely see it with the Vulcans. It was the Bajorans that kind of,
well, the Bajorans are kind of defined by their diaspora, right? And they're also
yeah,
they're
well, that's
they're
true.
they're defined by all these these oppressive regimes, that have been in
Well,
control of them,
that's, yeah,
right?
no,
And the
good point.
Cardassians are like Rome, and all that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Man, the third book in your series is going to be fantastic.
oh hey, it's gonna if I ever get there. I hope so, yeah, because Deep Space Nine is just marvelous.
Right. Yes.
So, but that idea is just coming to this thing, because I do talk about Christ figures in Star Trek. It's like, is it required? And I don't know that I'm giving much of an answer as much as a response. Brian McLaren likes to say that he has Q and R sessions when he speaks, because he's not sure he can give an answer, but he can give a response. I like that. um, but that's very much something that I did want to go ahead and respond to, and sort of uses our audience question this week, um, because I don't want to neglect that segment, because it gives us a chance to talk about interesting things. Um, but is just that idea that there are so many Christ figures that we can talk about in Star Trek, and most of them do have to do with death, or sacrificial death and resurrection, especially. And the great thing about that is, when I look at a Christ figure like Data, if I look at a Christ figure like Spock, if I look at a Christ figure like Ben Sisko, And I go back, and this is how all of the gospel according to Star Trek started. I saw Data as a Christ figure, and I went back through his whole story and just started saying, I know this isn't intended, but where else and how else does he reflect Jesus? And I did the same thing with Spock. And I just kind of started saying, you know, and then as we find those character traits in that character, then when they go and have their Christ moment, right? How does that inform their Christ moment? How does that enrich their Christ moment? What more does that tell us about their moment as a Christ figure, as a character? And then therefore, what might that infer, or what might we be able to infer from that about Jesus himself and about the significance of Christ? How does that help us meditate on the gospel? So I think, yes, a Christ figure can be more diverse than merely having a sacrificial death and or resurrection, but
with the requisite arm spread,
right,
to let the audience know this is a
just in
Christ
case
moment.
you hadn't noticed.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I do think a Christ figure properly understood tends to need to have that which makes Christ, that makes Jesus Christ, if you will, that makes Jesus uniquely Christ, and that is by doing the work of salvation on the cross. But yeah, it can go into these other areas as well. But we need to be careful, I think, that we don't toss it around too easily. And that's where I struggle too, is that I need to be careful about tossing around easily, even in Star Trek. But I think Chris Pike earned it this time around.
Yeah, agreed.
There you go.
I had to refresh my alpha memory about Surak real quick as you brought him up. And I just found it interesting to note, and it reminded me of a bit from Lower Decks. I did like the Roga Dinar argument that they were having over the shuttle pod. And
right.
Roga Dinar on Memory Alpha right now. Roga Dinar is one of the popular pages. Apparently a lot of people are looking him up right now.
Yep, as they should.
But no, I did have another question for you. I'm sure it can be addressed really quick since we're low on time.
Okay.
How do you stop from falling out of a bird of prey?
Oh boy. How, Tim?
You just have to cling on.
Oh boy.
Oh, as Alf would say, I kill me.
Oh gosh, because I'm not there and I can't.
Oh,
I know. That's terrible. I really appreciate you quoting Alf. That's awesome. Alf is one of my favorite. Anyway, yeah. Right. I'm gonna.
You're trying so hard not to get off on an Alf tangent.
So hard not to derail on Alf. Yes. I love Alf so much. Okay, all right. I think that's it. How do we usually end these things? Do I say, Tim, what's going on next week? Is that what happens next?
You say, that's according to our non-script that we don't have at all.
We have no script, right? Okay, well, yes. Well, thank you for that, Tim, as usual. Very enlightening. What are we doing next week, Tim?
We're flying by the seat of our pants as we cover episode 9 of Lower Decks, and we'll take a dive into Saru.
All right. I think that sounds like a plan, or lack thereof. That sounds great. I'm excited about it. I hope everyone will join us. In the meantime, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and rate. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to ring that bell. Also, send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter or Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
42.
That's how old I'm turning in just a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, how about that? So, thanks on that note of my impending mortality, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.